captain of the forces. When I came to the reality, and saw regiments file off to the left far out of sight, fields intervening between the battalions, but a few troops sufficiently near me to observe their motions, I gave up all idea of understanding, even of seeing a battle, but attaching myself to Raymond, attended with intense interest to his actions. He showed himself collected, gallant, and imperial. His commands were prompt, his intuition of the events of the day to me miraculous. In the meantime the cannon roared, the music lifted up its enlivening voice at intervals, and we on the highest of the mounds I mentioned, too far off to observe the fallen sheaves which death gathered into his storehouse, beheld the regiments now lost in smoke, now banners and staves peering above the cloud, while shout and clamour drowned every sound. Early in the day Argyropoulo was wounded dangerously, and Raymond assumed the command of the whole army. He made few remarks, till, on observing through his glass the sequel of an order he had given, his face, clouded for a while with doubt, became radiant. "The day is ours!" he cried. "The Turks fly from the bayonet," and then swiftly he dispatched his aides de camp to command the horse to fall on the routed enemy. The defeat became total, the cannon ceased to roar, the infantry rallied, and horse pursued the flying Turks along the dreary plain. The staff of Raymond was dispersed in various directions, to make observations and bear commands. Even I was dispatched to a distant part of the field. The ground on which the battle was fought was a level plain, so level that from the tumuli you saw the waving line of mountains and the wide stretched horizon. Yet the intervening space was unvaried by the least irregularity, save such undulations as resembled the waves of the sea. The whole of this part of Thrace had been so long a scene of contest, that it had remained uncultivated, and presented a dreary barren appearance. The order I had received was to make an observation of the direction which a detachment of the enemy might have taken, from a northern tumulus. The whole Turkish army, followed by the Greek, had poured eastward. None but the dead remained in the direction of my side. From the top of the mound I looked far round. All was silent and deserted. The last beams of the nearly sunken sun shot up from behind the far summit of Mount Athos. The sea of Marmora still glittered beneath its rays, while the Asiatic coast beyond was half hid in the haze of a low cloud. Many a casque and bayonet and sword fallen from unnerved arms reflected the departing ray. They lay scattered far and near. From the east a band of ravens, old inhabitants of the Turkish cemeteries, came sailing along towards their harvest. The sun disappeared. This hour, melancholy yet sweet, has always seemed to me the time when we are most naturally led to commune with higher powers. Our mortal sternness departs, and gentle complacency invests the soul. But now, in the midst of the dying and the dead, how could a thought of heaven or sensation of tranquillity possess one of the murderers? During the busy day, my mind had yielded itself a willing slave to the state of things presented to it by its fellow beings. Historical association, hatred of the foe, and military enthusiasm had held dominion over me. Now I looked on the evening star, as softly and calmly it hung pendulous in the orange hues of sunset. I turned to the corse-strewn earth, and felt ashamed of my species. So perhaps were the placid skies, for they quickly veiled themselves in mist, and in this change assisted the swift disappearance of twilight usual in the south. Heavy masses of cloud floated up from the south-east, and red and turbid lightning shot from their dark edges. The rushing wind disturbed the garments of the dead, and was chilled as it passed over their icy forms. Darkness gathered round, the objects about me became indistinct. I descended from my station, and with difficulty guided my horse so as to avoid the slain. Suddenly I heard a piercing shriek. A form seemed to rise from the earth. It flew swiftly towards me, sinking to the ground again as it drew near. All this passed so suddenly that I with difficulty reined in my horse so that it should not trample on the prostrate being. The dress of this person was that of a soldier, but the bared neck and arms, and the continued shrieks discovered a female thus disguised. I dismounted to her aid, while she, with heavy groans, and her hand placed on her side resisted my attempt to lead her on. In the hurry of the moment I forgot that I was in Greece, and in my native accents endeavoured to soothe the sufferer. With wild and terrific exclamations did the lost, dying Evadne, for it was she, recognise the language of her lover. Pain and fear from her wound had deranged her intellects, while her piteous cries and feeble efforts to escape penetrated me with compassion. In wild delirium she called upon the name of Raymond. She exclaimed that I was keeping him from her, while the Turks with fearful instruments of torture were about to take his life. Then again she sadly lamented her hard fate, that a woman with a woman's heart and sensibility should be driven by hopeless love and vacant hopes to take up the trade of arms, and suffer beyond the endurance of man privation, labour, and pain, the while her dry hot hands pressed mine, and her brow and lips burned with consuming fire. As her strength grew less, I lifted her from the ground. Her emaciated form hung over my arm, her sunken cheek rested on my breast. In a sepulchral voice she murmured, "This is the end of love, yet not the end." And frenzy lent her strength as she cast her arm up to heaven. "There is the end! There we meet again! Many living deaths have I borne for thee, O Raymond, and now I expire, thy victim. By my death I purchase thee. Lo, the instruments of war, fire, the plague are my servitors. I dared, I conquered them all, till now. I have sold myself to death, with the sole condition that thou shouldst follow me. Fire, war, and plague, unite for thy destruction. O my Raymond, there is no safety for thee." With a heavy heart I listened to the changes of her delirium. I made her a bed of cloaks. Her violence decreased, and a clammy dew stood on her brow as the paleness of death succeeded to the crimson of fever. I placed her on the cloaks. She continued to rave of her speedy meeting with her beloved in the grave, of his death nigh at hand. Sometimes she solemnly declared that he was summoned. Sometimes she bewailed his hard destiny. Her voice grew feebler, her speech interrupted, a few convulsive movements, and her muscles relaxed. The limbs fell, no more to be sustained. One deep sigh, and life was gone. I bore her from the near neighbourhood of the dead. Wrapped in cloaks, I placed her beneath a tree. Once more I looked on her altered face. The last time I saw her she was 18, beautiful as poet's vision, splendid as a sultana of the East. 12 years had passed, 12 years of change, sorrow, and hardship. Her brilliant complexion had become worn and dark, her limbs had lost the roundness of youth and womanhood, her eyes had sunk deep, crushed and overworn. The hours had drained her blood and filled her brow with lines and wrinkles. With shuddering horror I veiled this monument of human passion and human misery. I heaped over her all of flags and heavy accoutrements I could find, to guard her from birds and beasts of prey, until I could bestow on her a fitting grave. Sadly and slowly I stemmed my course from among the heaps of slain, and guided by the twinkling lights of the town, at length reached Rodosto. End of Volume 2, Chapter 1.